one of the things that we just do first is just have a good look around. And I mean, we've had a bit of a look around last week, actually, to get a bit familiarized with this project. And so, just to click through, zoom out, zoom in, and click through the different things. Here we have the topographic data, I guess. Yeah, the Lola. And so,
yeah,
I mean, you can leave that on, Riccardo, because I'll just mark up a couple things. Let me get the annotate going here. Let's see what color would be good. Maybe I'll use green because we don't have any green things. Yes, one thing that you can immediately see, even just in the topographic data, there was some questions in the Q&A about the extent of the ejecta. Here, on the ejecta blanket, which is, outside of the rim, you can see that there's like a higher standing area. Okay, that's kind of where it's been the rim starts to be bent upwards, but then you can also see out here, there's even just in the topographic data, you can kind of start to see where there's a couple of steps in the ejecta. So maybe, Riccardo, you can turn off the Lola just so that we have the WAC, and let's see. Yeah, see that also.
Let me try to see where is the WAC mosaic.
Oh yeah, where that is. Okay, because that was the. Okay, there's the WAC mosaic.
This is the DTM. Yeah.
Okay, and the hillshade or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the WAC. Yeah.
Right. So you can kind of start to see that the topography gave me a little bit of an idea of where some of the different parts of the ejecta blanket were. So let me clear that off because I can't toggle it on and off. But yeah, you can see that there's like some transition here from a higher standing, slightly rougher material, and then going out into some slightly smoother material. Okay, which, maybe is about here. This is something that we would zoom in a bit more and see exactly where we want to draw a boundary. At some point here, this is kind of smooth going out to about here, but then we start having these secondary chains, which are much more isolated and easy to see. Here. Well, I'm just not drawing on them so you can still see them. Right? Yeah, so that is kind of, how I'm looking at the ejecta blanket. Here I notice that there are two younger craters that that post-date the ejecta blanket. Those we would zoom in and have a closer look at, but those are clearly sharp rimmed, and one of them has a really nice, bright ejecta blanket. And then it looks to me like maybe this crater also post-dates the ejecta. That we could go and look at that later if we wanted to. It seems to have excavated some darker Mare basalt out from underneath the ejecta blanket, which probably would show up in the compositional data as well.
Okay.
Sasha, would you?
Should I? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say if those two had some other comments, and then I don't know, maybe we could go ahead and mark some provisional boundaries for our different ejecta.
Okay, or shall I zoom in just to check the craters?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can do that.
So let's zoom in with these craters here.
Yeah, so naturally, yeah, go ahead.
The resolution of a WAC mosaic is around 100 meters per pixel. So the more we zoom in, the less detail we see. So this is good, as Carolyn showed, to have an overview and start with a broad, bigger picture of our area of interest. And once we are zooming in, we will use higher resolution data. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the WAC is really good at this overview, and you really get already a lot of information out of it.
You can have a look also at this this boundary,
Right.
this is the boundary you traced, right? The proximal either outer rim, and the farther you go, you start seeing secondary chains coming from the center of the crater.
Right, that kind of smooth, the smoother
Move this
continuous
button.
ejecta. Yeah,
So we have more space.
right. Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
think probably one of the things that I would do, and maybe Wajia and Sasha can also chime in here, is to start with some of the stuff that's easy. And so maybe the easiest thing here to define would be the rim, because that is really sharp in almost all of the parts.
So let's say I zoom in a bit and then I will start marking the rim.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Before doing that, let's go and check Mappy. So we should have all installed Mappy. If not, go to plugins, manage and install plugins, go to settings, check show experimental plugins, and then type Mappy here and install. Okay, once Mappy is installed, you got two buttons, actually three buttons. The gear button here is the one for the map interface. And the other one is to create the map itself. You don't have to do all the other things that we did last days, for example, quick mapping project setup, etc. We already did it for you. What you just need to do is to check if these, which are our construction lines, linear features, the source contacts, and the source indicators are correctly placed here. So the limits layers should be not linear features, but source contacts. Indicator points is correct, is source indicators, the units field, the unit name. Mappy should have always, all the time, this configuration. The source files have to be placed here. Okay, so please check in the Mappy interface that you open with this gear button that you have these fields correctly filled. If it's wrong, simply open the drop-down menu and then click and fill it correctly. Then you can close, and it should be okay for the whole mapping session. If you save your project, you close QGIS, and then you reopen it, there might be the chance that you have to go and check again the fields. It's a good practice. Always when you open a project, also, if you already work on that and save and close the QGIS, always go and check before starting to map. If you don't do that, you might end up in using the wrong files, and then the map is not generated correctly. So I will use the source contacts now to map the contacts. And for the sake of visibility, I will go right-click properties and change the color, because gray onto gray probably is not the best one. So what could be a good one? Like cyan or yellow.
That seems like that's probably good.
Let's try. Let's try. So thickness, we can leave it as it is for the moment. We are good to go. So if you remember, once we have selected the object we want to edit, we can click on the pencil, toggle editing, or as usual, right click, toggle editing is the same. So now that we have our pencil here, we can go here with the yellow star and add linear feature. And if you remember from the lesson of Luca, you don't have to be super precise at first instance. You can start adding the basic shapes and you can refine it later on. So I will start adding a point with my left click here, and I will start marking my rim. And you don't have to be super precise. You can always refine your work. The thing is, as Carolyn said, is to start, let's say, maybe you have better words than mine, Carolyn, but to discretize or to subdivide the image in different domains. For example, now here, I right click, and this is a certain contact, right? So I can type certain, and I click OK, and then I want to start over because maybe I need to stop for any reason. And then simply remember that you have to cross the lines. So I can start from here and then crossing here, here. So once you have crossed here the lines, when we will refresh our map or recompute the map with Mappy, these two dangles will go away. This is just for us for constructing the map. With our mouse wheel, we can zoom in and zoom out and to map correctly. We can also go here on the hand. We can move. You see that the line is still red. So once you click again on the add line featured button, you can continue to map the same line. For example, I want to stop here. I right click. This is certain. Again. And so we added it. And then we can start and continue to mark the crest of the crater rim. Okay, let me go with the hand. I will drag and then go back here to start editing again and continue to edit my polyline. We'll do it in a bit not super precise way, but zoom in,
Right.
go back here, and then cross, right click, certain, and then we're good, right? We can save it either by clicking here, or if we want to stop editing the source context for the moment, we simply toggle and save. Now this file is permanent on your computer. Also, if you do not save the project, this file is in your computer, but we save the project just in case. You remember yesterday my QGIS crashed a couple of times. So
Right, always save more often than you think you might need to. Because it's really annoying if you've put in a lot of features and then you've lost it at the end. Some things you can redo, but don't want to have to do that. So as Riccardo was zooming in and out to make the line, you might have noticed that there are, when you zoom in, quite a few small impact melt ponds. They're kind of flat looking. Here's one up here that maybe, just moved it, up to the northern, on the outside here. So for example, right here, there's an impact melt pond and stuff. And so one thing you want to have in mind from the very beginning of your map is how much detail you're going to add to your map. So that's your map scale. And so probably you're not going to want to draw all of these little tiny craters into your map, okay? The bigger ones would make sense, but you need to kind of set a limit for the size of features that you're going to take into account. And so maybe, Wajia, do you want to say a little bit about how you control for your map scale when you're working on your maps?
Right. So what you normally see is first you recognize what should be the smallest feature you want to map in your map, and this will set your scale. For example, if you want to map this crater, then you should map all the features that are bigger in this as big as this crater. You will not map this crater in this case. So you have to be careful what is the smallest feature you will have. And in digitized mapping, this is something when this zoom in area is your mapping scale, because you don't have the same scale like topographic sheets that 1 centimeter is equivalent to 1 mile or something. It's different in this case here. So yeah, as Carolyn said, be careful when you are careful in selecting the smallest feature you will map in your map in this scale.
Right. So one strategy too is you decide that, and then like Riccardo is clicking, you actually just select one of those. Okay, and so then you would know, I mean, you're going to want to zoom in and zoom out anyway as you're working on the map and making your lines and moving around. But if you have set your map scale at 1 to 250,000, you can keep coming back to that and double check that you're not mapping too many details. Sometimes you want to do lots of details. That, of course, you need more time to do it. So just something to keep in mind as you learn the mapping process. One thing that's unfortunate.
Of course, you can choose many
yeah.
scales. You see, there are preset. You can also type it your own scale. Or if I want 1 to 30,000, you can click here. This is too much, so 300,000 is maybe better.
Right,
so,
doesn't work for
general control. Yeah, yeah.
You're right. That doesn't work for the WAC data.
No.
Right. Yeah, what you want to avoid is to have not to end up with a map that has like really detailed stuff in one part that you've mapped out compared with other parts of the map. Because then it's hard to actually use for interpreting the geologic processes and whether they were consistently operating over the entire area and stuff, because you haven't had a consistent scale throughout the whole process. So I think for today, we're not going to map very, very detailed. But it's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, so maybe we can zoom out again. What would be like the next thing that we should map? That would be kind of the next most obvious, easy thing. Maybe the central peak.
Okay, so controls for zooming out. This button is very helpful if we want to zoom out on the whole extent. You simply click this one. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so we see now, maybe, you know, I think the next clearest boundaries that we could maybe mark would be maybe the edge of the crater floor, and then the border for the central peak parts. Where we're going to need to spend a little more careful time looking at is there are more little pieces that we'll have to decide if they actually are going to belong to the central peak complex or if there's something else.
Yeah, for the moment, I think it's fair enough to start just marking if we see that. So then when we recompute the map, we can start assigning the units.
Exactly.
And this is a good way to do, because one thing is observing, the other thing is interpreting. And we are now observing the contacts. Once we have a fair amount of contacts and then MAPI computed a fair amount of polygons, we can start interpreting whether a contact is subdividing two different units with the two different ages, so on and so forth. So I guess, as Carolyn said, we will stick to observation now and start mapping just the contacts that we see. And I guess that we can start to map like the more the sharper contacts, and then we will see if we have some faint contacts or uncertain contacts. Do you think, Carolyn, we can start using Kaguya at this stage, or we continue with the WAC?
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe. Well, turn it on and let's see what it looks like.
Okay, so now we are at, let's say we are at 1 at 300,000 zoom level. Okay. So we see features, but we start seeing a bit blurry. There are quite a few pixels that start to be visible. So maybe we can enable the Kaguya terrain camera mosaic, which is at 8 meters per pixel. So basically 1 order of magnitude better resolution rather than the WAC. So we can turn this on. You see the shading is different. So you might want to play also between the two. Yeah. On the Kaguya terrain camera, the light is coming from east towards west, more or less. In that case, the light is coming from the opposite direction. So it's also good to check the contacts. For example, here I see better the contacts here. if I turn the Kaguya train camera on, I see better the contacts in this other direction. So I guess we can use both of them independently. So let's say I want to mark this contact. To me, it appears quite sharp. So I select my source contacts, toggle on the editing, and here I will start adding a few nodes again. Don't be super precise. This is just our first mapping task. So here, I don't know how to proceed because I see that the contact in between, I don't know, Carolyn, what's your suggestion, but here it doesn't appear to be sharp. I don't know if this is
Right.
going around here. So
Yeah, I think
maybe
initially I might just go around there actually and just include it.
Okay,
Uh,
we go around.
Because we are not mapping at a very fine scale, you would add this.
Yeah. What we can do is to check with Kaguya. So we can enable Kaguya. You see that also there's a problem which was Trent talked about it yesterday. There is not a perfect co-registration between the images. So, I mean, there might be some small shifts, but Carolyn was right. And actually the border was passing through here. I was a bit sloppy here. So we can adjust with this button and we can adjust the vertices, add a new vertex here, move this one to be a bit more consistent and more precise. Anyways, the contact here is a bit less clear. So I'd say I can continue adding I will start always all the time crossing the two so that the map is able to clean it. And I'm starting to interpret that probably the contact is passing through here, but I'm not completely 100% sure. Instead, from here on, I am sure again. So I can right click and here we can write, I don't know, inferred. What do you think, Carolyn? Inferred is good, the word?
yeah, yeah. It's a little bit less clear.
Or uncertain, that depends.
Normally inferred contacts are the ones that are slightly covered by another unit, and you see that it was passing through there, but you can't see them clearly. I would rather use approximate.
Okay. Approximate. Once we start adding these tags, then we can also symbolize our layer. For the moment, I'm just continuing. This is, again, I think passing through here, right? Certain. I need to move, so hand to. Now here, let's have a look. I'm not completely sure at the moment what's happening here, but I am sure of what's happening here. I need to correct this a bit. So we go to source contacts. We start moving a bit the nodes. Yeah, to match more precisely our boundaries. We can add one more here. And then we can also, you see the plus button, we can also continue to add more nodes and we can simply continue to map. So should I go up here and continue this way?
Yeah, there's one question in the Q&A that said, that noticed that we've zoomed in a bit too far for our map, scale.
Yeah, I mean, it's
right.
It's good to zoom in and zoom out, but we always have to pay attention, of course. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When you're drawing the lines, it's actually not a bad idea to, once you've fixed what your scale is, what you're going to mark, it's not bad to make the line a little bit smoother by zooming in a tiny bit closer, so that when you're at your map scale, you don't end up with like pointy parts on your border, unless there's really a point there. But
there's a rule of thumb, which is if you are setting your final mapping scale to a specific scale, you are basically allowed to zoom in at least 3 times to have the contacts a bit smoother, as Carolyn said. So if you are mapping to a specific scale, you can zoom in 3 times, and this is your maximum allowed zooming in power, let's say. I can stay here, and I can continue adding nodes with plus button, and I go here, here, and until here. And okay. So what about this area here? Let me see.
Yeah, we can kind of switch back and forth. Okay, yeah, there we've got the, of course, the problem.
Something like
I see something going up here. I'm not sure what's happening here.
looks
Maybe we can do that, and we use it approximate as a tag for the contact.
Right.
Would also use approximate, and it, for me it looks, if I switch back from WAC to Kaguya, that this whole area here looks a bit collapsed, so that we have a landslide from
Yeah, I guess that's the ridge, right?
direction. Yeah.
Yeah, of the central peak. Yeah, I'm also wondering if we should include this part, because it's not obvious in the Kaguya, but if you switch back to the other data set,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, there's or here that maybe the border should go around more like that when we clear all this stuff, so that it
Okay,
should
we
go
can adjust
like
it, and we
this.
can move it.
Yeah.
Let's go here, and maybe we can make use of this data, which is a bit clear. So we can.
Yeah, the
use
WAC
brackets.
is just really good. It seems like the Kaguya data is a bit more like the incidence angle is not as high as on the WAC data.
Let me just see. You see, I didn't cross here the 2 lines. I need to do that. If not, map is not closing the polygon. Okay.
So when
We can add
it's just
one.
like when we are mapping topographically contrasting areas, it's also useful to use a hill shade
Mm,
there.
Yes, exactly. Okay,
Yeah,
let's
good
try
point.
and have a look. Yes, indeed. So where is it? It's here. Yeah.
yeah, excellent point. Yeah, yeah, because then
Excellent point. Yes.
And it's
that break in
more
slope
clear.
is really good to see. Yeah.
Yeah. If you remember the hill shade, we have created it yesterday, and it's made out of the DTM. And here we see that we can be fairly happy, probably. No. So
Yeah, it looks
I'd
pretty
say
good,
that
I
this
think.
part is good. We can do this other part and maybe do a small break, or
Yeah,
we can do the
we're-
break now and continue.
Right. I
continue
was just
later.
gonna say that we're now at 10:30.
Yeah.
Time for the coffee break. Maybe when everybody, you know, if you get back to your projects after grabbing a drink, have a look around in the floor of the crater and think a little bit about, okay, what are central peak parts that we're going to want to include, and what might be other things like blocks, mega blocks of debris that have just fallen down into the impact melt from the crater walls, because at some
Exactly.
point that's a little tricky.
We all are agreeing that this thing has to be contoured, right? But
Yeah,
all the other features inside, we have to think about it a bit more carefully.
right. You know, like
I can.
like this little
Sorry.
guy here. Whoops, here, wait, let me draw that
this
again.
one.
This one, yeah, is that might still be part of the central peak. And maybe we can there also look and see if the compositional information is going to help us. And so I think that's where, but you know, given the size of this thing, you know, it's the same size as some of these other bumps that are probably mega blocks. So I think that's maybe something to think about during the coffee break. And then we can continue with our on hands mapping thing. The coffee
Okay.
break is a half an hour long. I don't
Half an hour, yes.
half an hour. Okay. Yeah, then I would say that we will be back in a half an hour, and we'll continue to work on the map. And you can also continue to put questions and answers. Answers might be a little slower now in the next half hour since we want a coffee too. But then we'll be back on the ball at 11.
Maybe Riccardo.
In the meantime, I can answer a few questions. Can you recover how to open your project? To open a project, you have to go to your folder, your project folder, and let me show you. You have to download it, of course. And for example, here I have my project folder. This is what you have downloaded. Actually, this is what you have downloaded. We'll find a release. You go here in the QGZ and you double click it. And then it opens up in QGIS. Or if you don't want to do that, you simply go here and you open your project. How can I delete a node? Okay, how can I delete a node? Let me add another small contact here around this portion of the central peak. Let me click. I'll start adding a few nodes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I simply make a node wrong. I have to go here on this button, close to the Add New Features button, the one with the hammer. Go here, you hover your mouse on top of your polyline, and you simply hover on top of a node. You click with your left button of your mouse, and you hit delete on your keyboard. Okay? Click, delete. Very easy. And then we can save.